Champagne, sir? The attendant's smile didn't reach her eyes, didn't even glance my way. Amara gripped her stylus, rage a slow burn under her skin. Skipped. Again. They think I'm invisible, easy to erase. They don't know about the recorder humming softly beneath the cracked screen of my tablet. Fine. Let them underestimate me. This isn't about a damn drink. It's about a lifetime of being unseen. What they don't realize? My silence isn't weakness. It's data collection. Every slight, every calculated dismissal, time-stamped, filed, and soon, undeniable. Let them enjoy their champagne. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. Passengers murmured in soft tones, their words cushioned by leather seats and polished wood panels. For most, it was another flight of 5-hour stretch between boardrooms, deals, and luxury hotels. But for Amar Jenkins, seat 2A was not just a seat. It was a marker, a checkpoint in a journey she had carved out of sheer grit. At 43, she carried herself with a quiet grace that came from years of building something from nothing. Tailored charcoal suit, silver hair, streaking her temple like earned wisdom, a calm poise that made her presence known without a single word. She placed her tablet gently on the fold-out table. The screen glowed with designs, towers of steel and glass, her mind already at work sketching structures that would rise higher than the doubts of her past. But before her stylus even touched the glass, the fracture came. A flight attendant paused at her road tray, in hand smile plastered across her face. "Champagne, sir?" she asked, leaning toward the man in 2B. Her voice was warm, attentive, practiced. The man chuckled, took his glass, and they shared a brief laugh about vintages. The attendant moved on to 3A to 3B, refilling, offering, leaning in with courtesy. Amara sat stylus poised untouched. Her glass table gleamed empty. At first she thought little of it. Mistakes happen. Service is a rhythm. Sometimes a beat is missed. But then came the second pass. Sandwiches offered down the aisle like communion. "For you, sir." "For you, ma'am." Tray set, napkins tucked. Her row again skipped. She raised her eyes calm but steady. The attendant's gaze passed right over her as though her body and the seat were transparent, a shadow without form. The silence around her thickened. The man in 2B shifted awkwardly, sipping his champagne too quickly. A woman in 3A glanced sideways, brows furrowed, but said nothing. It wasn't the absence of a glass that cut. It was the presence of dismissal, the quiet, practiced invisibility that told Amar this was no accident. Her mother's voice rose unbidden, a memory tucked deep. "Baby, when they don't see you, you make yourself undeniable. Stand tall. Their eyes may slide past, but truth cannot be erased." Amara adjusted her stylus, tapped the tablet screen once, and the data recorder within it began to run. Not loud, not flashy, just quiet logging. Every pause, every skipped row, every turned shoulder recorded with a timestamp sealed in memory. Her face betrayed nothing. She traced a line across glass, the beginnings of a new tower. Yet beneath her fingertip, the log ticked, skipped service row 2, passed over twice, no acknowledgement. Across the aisle, a college student had begun to record too, her phone angled discreetly, her whisper slipping into the mic. "So this black woman in 2A hasn't been served at all. Everybody else has champagne sandwiches. Nothing for her? You're watching it live." The live stream counter ticked upward, first dozens, then hundreds. Amar didn't move. Her silence was deliberate, not passive. It was the patience of fencing matches where victory came not from swinging wildly, but from holding steady, waiting for the precise moment to strike. It was the balance of horseback rides reined steady while the ground bucked beneath. The attendant returned once more, this time with bottled water. Her hand hovered over 2B, then swung past Amara as though her seat were air. The bottle clinked down on another tray. A man in 4C muttered under his breath. Unbelievable. The silver-haired woman across the aisle adjusted her scarf, eyes narrowing. Amara lifted her stylus, drew another line. The log ticked again, denial of service, row 2. The air in the cabin was no longer soft. It was brittle like glass stretched too thin. And that was when the businessman in 2C leaned forward, his voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Some people just don't belong here, always making trouble. The words hung heavy. A silence spread thicker than champagne foam. The college student's live stream counter spiked 125. Comments scrolled fast. Did he just say that? What the hell? Protect 2A. Amar's hand did not tremble. She set the stylus down, folded her hands atop the tablet, and turned her gaze to the window. Outside, the runway shimmered in the heat. Inside, a storm was building. The attendant returned with a forced smile. Ma'am, would you like water now? The tone was clipped, reluctant, as though granting a favor. Amar's lips parted, her voice even measured calm. I asked for nothing, and I will not beg for what I already paid. Gasps rippled across the cabin. The silver-haired woman's scarf slipped from her shoulders. The college student whispered into her stream. You guys, she finally spoke. The comments exploded chills. Queen energy. This is bigger than water. And before the attendant could reply, before the man in 2C could smirk again, Amara lifted her tablet slightly, its cracked glass reflecting the cabin lights. She tapped the corner, sealing the log. Not a single word more. Not a raised tone, just data captured like evidence. The cabin had become a stage, every passenger an audience, every camera a witness, and yet the lead actor said nothing more. Not yet, because silence, when held with discipline, was its own form of thunder. And as the plane's doors sealed and the engines roared to life, the question settled like a drumbeat across every screen, watching from afar. What happens when the woman they dismissed as invisible turns out to be the one holding the record that could bring them all down? The plane lifted off the runway, nose tilting skyward, engines rumbling like a storm beneath polished floors and plush seats. In a first class, glasses rattled lightly, screens flickered, and passengers settled back with the familiar ritual of adjusting seatbelts and tucking blankets. But peace had not returned. It lingered, the silence after Amara's words, the weight of her refusal to beg, a refusal that carried farther than champagne flutes or napkins could reach. The college student's phone, balanced carefully in her hands, streamed the moment to thousands. Viewers leaned closer to their screens, pausing dinner, turning up volume, whispering across couches. Did you see that? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. In seat 2C, the businessman muttered again, as though the hum of a scent gave him permission. This is exactly why people like her shouldn't be here. Always looking for a fight. The words were not shouted, but they carried. The silver-haired woman in 3D snapped her head toward him, eyes sharp. She asked for nothing. You're the one making trouble. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with decades of stored indignation. For a moment, the cabin itself seemed to shift, dividing a lining bracing. Amara sat still. Her hands rested lightly on the cracked tablet. The glow of its screen reflected upward, casting a faint light under her chin. Her posture did not falter. Years of fencing had taught her this stance, chin-level spine, straight breath, steady, no movement wasted, no words spent carelessly. She remembered her mother again, not just the words, but the scene. A janitor's uniform soaked at the collar, fingers raw from bleach, tapping keys late into the night. Her mother had whispered, "The world won't always open the door. Sometimes you must build your own." Those lessons were the steel beneath her silence now. The attendant returned, her face pinched tight, professional smile, cracking under the weight of scrutiny. She reached for Amara's tray with a half-hearted gesture. "Ma'am, are you sure you don't want?" Amara lifted her eyes steady as steel. "I am she." The attendant's hand froze midair. She pulled back, flustered, and moved quickly to the galley. The college student's stream ticked up again. 20,000, 30, 50. The comment scroll blurred, Queen. She doesn't even need to yell. That stare was colder than the champagne. Linda, 2 rows back, leaned toward her companion, whispering not so quietly. Something's happening here. This isn't just a bad service moment. This is going to blow up. And she was right, because already Twitter had caught wind. Clips clipped from the live stream were circulating with captions. Black woman in 2A refused water 3 times. Still silent, still seated. Hashtags bloomed like fire. C2A dignity. In the Sky House, she said nothing. By the time the seatbelt sign blinked off, millions had already seen her stillness. In the cabin, the tension hardened further. The businessman in 2C cleared his throat loudly, glancing at his watch as though her silence delayed time itself. The silver-haired woman crossed her arms, daring him to speak again. The cardigan woman leaned forward, whispering prayers under her breath. And Amara, she turned her tablet, angling it slightly, sketching the line of a tower across the fracture. Not hiding, not rushing. Her stylus glided with the calm of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Every passenger felt it. The discipline, the choice, the undeniable presence of someone who refused to vanish. For the live stream audience, it was no longer a glass of water. It was something bigger. They debated in real time. Would you have shouted? Would you have demanded a supervisor? Would you have switched seats? The answers came fast, furious, divided. And then came the first celebrity retweet. A civil rights lawyer posted, "The calm of seat 2A is louder than any microphone." Watching closely, it was liked 50,000 times within minutes. The ripple spread. ICE shared a clip with the caption, "Strength looks like this." Viola Davis added a single word, "unmoved." Back in the cabin, Amara remained what she had always been. Still the stylus gliding the crack across her screen, glowing faintly, a reminder that fractures were not endings. The businessman finally leaned back, grumbling under his breath. The attendant disappeared into the galley, cheeks flushed, and the college student whispered into her phone, "You guys, I think this flight is going to change everything. Stay tuned." The counter on her screen passed 100,000. Outside, clouds folded like silk. Inside, silence pressed against every wary wall, every seat. The first-class cabin had become something else entirely. A courtroom, a theater, a live broadcast no one had bought a ticket for, but everyone was watching. And though Amara said nothing more, the world was already speaking for her. The voice of narration slipped in calm and resonant, bridging cabin to community. You are listening to Black Stories Unveiled. We do not tell these stories for spectacle, but for what they reveal. Dignity ignored becomes dignity defended. And when one woman sits tall in silence, the whole world leans forward. The plane leveled off above the clouds, engines settling into their long-haul rhythm. But inside the first-class cabin, nothing was steady. Silence pressed like weight on glass. Every whisper cracked louder than an announcement. Every glance was loaded with judgment. The businessman in 2C adjusted his cufflinks, clearing his throat with the self-importance of someone who believed the cabin belonged to him. Honestly, he muttered just loud enough for the row to hear if she wanted better service. Maybe she should smile more. Or, not act like she owns the place. Heads turned. The silver-haired woman in 3D snapped, "She does own her place. She paid for her seat same as you." Her voice trembled, but her spine was iron. The cardigan woman clutched her rosary tighter, whispering prayers beneath her breath. The young man in 4 shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable." The attendant reappeared, face-tight tray of bottled water in hand. Her steps faltered as she approached row 2. The cameras, all of them from phones tilted at subtle angles, caught the moment. "Ma'am," she said, tone clipped, "are you sure you wouldn't like anything at all? Water, maybe just to keep things smooth." Amara lifted her eyes, calm as steel. Smooth for whom the words slid across the cabin like a blade unshathed, not shouted, not sharp in volume, but sharp in clarity. The silver-haired woman gasped softly. The businessman rolled his eyes. The college student whispered into her stream. "Did you hear that?" she asked, smooth for whom. Oh my God. The counter surged. 80,000, 100,000, 120,000 comments flew across the screen. "She's a master with words. Queen in 2A. This is bigger than service. This is bias live," the attendant stammered. "For everyone, of course. We just want things to stay peaceful." Amar's gaze didn't waver. "Peace isn't served by pretending I'm invisible." The cabin froze. Even the air vents seemed to hush. The man in 2C scoffed, his face flushing red. "Oh, for God's sake, this is ridiculous. You're making this into something it isn't. She skipped you once. Big deal. Let it go." The silver-haired woman spun in her seat, voice shaking with fury. She skipped her 3 times. And you said she didn't belong. You let that go. The businessman's jaw clenched. He muttered, "People like you always play the race card." Gasps filled the cabin. Phones tilted higher. Every lens caught his words, his face, his arrogance. The live stream counter surged to 150,000, 180,000, 200,000. The college student whispered, "Oh my God, he really said it. Did you guys hear that?" The comments exploded. "Cancel him. This is straight racism live. Protect seat 2A. Amar's face did not change. She adjusted her tablet slightly, tapping once. The log ticked on hostile passenger row 2. No tremor in her hand, no flare in her voice, just a record calm as scripture. The attendant powled, retreating to the galley. The businessman sank back, muttering curses, but the damage was done. His words were already spinning across Twitter, clipped into GIFs, stitched into TikToks. One edit paired his line, "People like you always play the race card," with a steady silence, her eyes calm, tablet glowing. Caption power doesn't need volume. The hashtag #seat shot to trending. Within 30 minutes, 500,000 viewers were tuned into streams. Celebrities joined. Trevor Noah retweeted with "The grace and silence speaks louder than his noise." Kerry Washington posted chills. Absolute chills. In the cabin, the tension split into factions. Some passengers whispered support. Others muttered impatience, but no one looked away. The silver-haired woman folded her arms, defiantly aligned with Amara. The cardigan woman murmured, "God bless her." The businessman sat stiff, glaring at his phone, suddenly too quiet. And Amara, she resumed her sketch. A tower rising across fractured glass stylus, gliding with patience, honed by years of discipline. Her mother's words echoed again. "Baby, don't rush to prove them wrong. Live long enough, and the truth will outlast their noise." She breathed evenly. Every inhale steady, every exhale controlled. To the cameras, it was as if she were fencing again, blade poised, waiting for the strike that would expose her opponent. She didn't need to thrust. The cabin had already delivered the blow for her. The college student's whisper grew urgent. "We're at 300,000, do you hear me? 300,000 watching this live. This is history." The comments scrolled too fast to read. "Airline better be ready. FAA needs to see this. This is systemic. Look how calm she is. And they're still attacking her." The silver-haired woman leaned across the aisle slightly, her voice low, respectful. "You don't have to do anything more, dear. You've already shown them." Amara inclined her head, gently acknowledging without words. The cabin hummed, not with engines, but with judgment, with history, with the weight of being witnessed. And as the college student whispered, "Stay tuned, guys. This is only the beginning." The world leaned closer, waiting for the next move. The engines hummed a steady rhythm, but inside the cabin, that rhythm had fractured. No one was watching the in-flight entertainment anymore. No one cared about the champagne or the linen line trays. The first-class cabin had become a stage, and every passenger knew it. The businessman in 2C sat rigid, arms crossed, face flushed. His words, "People like you always play." The race card still echoed. Phones tilted toward him, capturing every twitch, every bead of sweat on his forehead. The live stream counter ticked upward to gain 350,000, 400,000, 450,000. The college student voice hushed, but trembling with adrenaline, whispered into her phone, "This isn't just a flight anymore. This is history in real time." The silver-haired woman leaned forward, scarf slipping from her shoulder. "You think this is about cards?" she snapped. "This is about dignity. You don't hand that out like a favor. It's hers already paid for." Gas fluttered across the rows. Some nodded. Others looked down uncomfortable. The flight attendant re-emerged from the galley, cheeks pink, jaw clenched. She glanced around the cabin, clearly aware of the cameras but still bristling with defensiveness. In her hand was a clipboard, the kind crew used for incident reports. "Ma'am," she said, tone sharp now, eyes darting toward Amara. "I'll need to note your behavior for the captain. You're disrupting the cabin." The words detonated in the air. Passengers stiffened. The businessman smirked as though vindicated. Amara lifted her gaze slowly, calm as stone. My behavior. The attendant's chin jutted forward. Yes, refusing service repeatedly causing unrest among other passengers. We can't allow disturbances to escalate. The silver-haired woman shot up straighter. Disturbance. She hasn't moved. She hasn't raised her voice once. The cardigan woman whispered sharply. You're the one escalating, not her. Phone zoomed closer. The live stream comment section erupted. Did she really say that, disrupting? She's literally silent. This is bias on camera. The counter hit 500,000. Amara's hand moved. Stylus gliding across the cracked tablet. One line, another, steady strokes forming the outline of a tower. Her face betrayed nothing. Then gently she tapped the corner of the screen. A soft chime signaled the log entry, accused of disruption despite silence. She lifted her eyes once more, voice even carrying across the hushed cabin. Document it all. Every silence, every denial, every accusation. Document it well. The attendant froze clipboard, trembling in her hands. The college student whispered frantically, "Oh my God, did you hear that? She just told them to document it. She knows exactly what she's doing." The stream surged 600,000, 700,000. On Twitter, hashtags multiplied. Your shard documented had dignity and AA audit this flight. Lawyers began posting threads in real time citing federal aviation regulations. Passengers cannot be targeted for bias under FAA Part 382. One tweet read, "This is actionable. In the cabin tension mounted," the businessman muttered. Finally, someone with authority gesturing to the attendant, but his confidence faltered as murmurs spread, murmurs of disbelief, of support for Amara. A man in 4D gray suit finally spoke. "I work in aviation law. What I'm witnessing is a liability nightmare. She's right. Document it because this is going straight to regulators." The attendant's face drained of color. She stepped back, muttering something into her radio. Amar returned her gaze to the window stylus moving again, her silence now heavier than thunder. The cabin divided into factions more clearly, half glared at the attendant, disgusted. A few whispered about delays, about how they just wanted peace. But no one could look away. In the live stream it crossed 800,000 to then 900,000. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, 1 million viewers were tuned in across TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Live celebrities piled on Ava DuVernay, tweeted powers in the pause. Watching her hold the line in 2A is unforgettable. Trevor Noah followed with silence, log-like evidence. This is bigger than one flight memes exploded. One showed Amara's calm face with the caption, "She's not angry, she's auditing." Another showed the attendant scribbling on the clipboard, captioned, "Documenting her own downfall." Back in the cabin, the air was electric. The college student whispered into her phone, "You guys, we just crossed 1 million. This is everywhere. This is bigger than viral. This is accountability in real time." Her comments flew so fast they blurred. "She's legendary. This is an audit in silence. FAA better be watching." The silver-haired woman clasped Amar's hand gently across the aisle, whispering, "You're not alone." Mar's eyes softened briefly, gratitude flashing before her calm mask returned. The businessman muttered again, quieter this time, but every camera caught it. "Ridiculous circus." His words were drowned by a rising murmur, supporters whispering, affirming, rallying, and Amara. She tapped her tablet once more, sealing the log. The faint crack across the screen glowed like a scar, but the lines of her tower continued to rise steady, unbroken. The narrator's voice, calm and resonant, threaded through the roar of 1 million screens. "You are listening to Black Stories Unveiled. These are not stories told for noise, but for truth, and truth has no need to shout." One woman seated in silence has already turned a cabin into a courtroom and a world into a witness. The plane cruised high above the clouds, steady as if nothing unusual was happening inside. But the first-class cabin was no longer a sanctuary of soft jazz and silverware. It was a courtroom mid-air charged with tension thick enough to slice. The live stream counter ticked past 1.2 million. Comments scrolled so fast they blurred. Hashtags trended worldwide. #audit this flight dignity into a document. Celebrities, politicians, journalists were watching live, And still Amar Jenkins sat in seat 2A, silent stylist gliding across cracked glass building towers above fractures. The flight attendant reappeared with another clipboard, lips pressed thin. She spoke into her radio, nodding curtly, then turned to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a passenger issue in row 2. Please remain calm as we escalate this to the captain. Gas rippled across the rows. Cameras tilted higher. The businessman in 2C smirked, muttering, "Finally some order." The silver-haired woman leaned forward, fury in her eyes. "Order. The only disorder here is prejudice, and the whole world just saw it." The attendant's jaw tightened. "Ma'am," she said to Amara, a voice strained but still clipped with authority. "You are being issued a formal warning for disruptive behavior." The words detonated like dynamite. Passengers erupted in protest. The cardigan woman clutched her rosary tighter. The aviation lawyer in 40 shook his head. "You cannot. She has not disrupted anything. I'll testify under oath if I must." Phone zoomed in. The live stream counter jumped again. 1.4 million. Amara lifted her eyes, calm as ever. "A formal warning," she repeated softly. Then she placed her stylus on the tablet, tapped the corner. The chime confirmed the log entry, issued formal warning despite no disruption. Her voice carried quiet but resonant. "Document it." The attendant faltered, breath-catching. And then Amara shifted. For the first time in hours, she straightened fully, drawing the eyes of every passenger, every camera, every soul watching. She lifted the cracked tablet high enough for all to see its glow, catching the overhead lights like a gavel raised before a verdict. "My name," she said clearly, "is Dr. Amara Jenkins. I am not only a passenger in seat 2A, I am the Director of Compliance and Ethics for Airline International, with regulatory oversight tied directly to the Federal Aviation Administration." The cabin inhaled as one. Phones trembled. The businessman's smirk drained into shock. The flight attendant's clipboard slipped slightly in her grip. Amara continued, voice steady as stone. "Every moment of this flight has been logged. Every denial of service, every dismissal, every accusation of disruption without cause. This record will be filed as an official audit under FAA compliance review." Gasps turned into murmurs, into a low roar. The college student whispered frantically into her phone. "Oh my God, she's not just a CEO, she's the compliance director. This is an audit midair. You're watching it happen live." Her counter surged 1.8 million, then 2 million. The silver-haired woman clutched her chest, tears springing to her eyes. Thank God someone's finally holding them accountable. The aviation lawyer nodded vigorously. "This changes everything. She has authority, real authority." The attendant stammered, her voice breaking. I didn't. We didn't." Amar's gaze cut through her. "You did, and you documented it yourself. Peace isn't served by ignoring dignity. It is enforced by protecting it. This cabin will be audited in full." Phones shook as passengers captured her words. The live stream counter passed 2.5 million. Twitter exploded with clips captioned "Audit in the Sky." Director in 2A. She brought the FAA with her. The businessman in 2C sputtered, This is ridiculous. You can't just." Amara turned to him, her face calm, her voice even. "Sir, your words are already logged. People like you don't belong here. Do you deny them?" He froze, color draining from his face. Cameras zoomed in, waiting. Silence. The cardigan woman whispered, "He can't deny it." We all heard. The cabin shifted. Passengers leaned forward, murmuring, "Agreement." The tide had turned and everyone knew it. Amamar lowered her tablet slightly, stylus resting against glass. I did not raise my voice. I did not disrupt. I sat where I belonged, and in doing so, I revealed everything I needed to. Her mother's voice returned in memory, clear as dawn. "Baby, you don't always have to fight with fists or with shouts. Sometimes sitting still is the sharpest blade you carry." She exhaled slowly, spine straight, gaze unwavering. The college student's live stream reached 3 million. Comments screamed in all caps. "This is history. FAA about to torch this airline. Audit in real time. Unreal." News outlets cut in mid-broadcast. CNN flashed a banner, passenger revealed as FAA compliance director announces mid-air audit. MSNBC anchors gasped live on air. The Washington Post tweeted, "Audit in the sky, power of silence turns into regulatory action." The cabin buzzed with shock, awe, and fear. The attendant backed away slowly, clipboard clutched like a shield. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, strained and uncertain. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are aware of the situation in the forward cabin." But calm was long gone. The cabin was a storm now, and at its center Amara Jenkins, immovable, unshaken stylus resting lightly in her hand. Her voice carried one last time a verdict delivered midair. "This flight is no longer just a journey. It is evidence. And when we land, the world will know what dignity looks like when it refuses to be erased." The cabin fell silent, every passenger staring, every phone raised, every viewer holding their breath. The live stream counter ticked past 3.5 million. And still climbing, the flight pressed on through the sky, steady as a silver arrow cutting clouds. But on the ground, turbulence had already begun. What started as a live stream from a college student in row 3 had swelled into a tidal wave across platforms, pouring through phones, televisions, and boardrooms. By the time the aircraft crossed into cruising altitude, more than 4 million viewers were watching live. Clips sliced and spread like wildfire. One 30-second edit showed Amara raising her cracked tablet, declaring her role as director of compliance. Another captured the attendant accusing her the disruption, despite silence. Memes flooded timelines. The attendant clutching a clipboard captioned documenting her own firing. The businessman's flushed face beside the words Exhibit A. News anchors broke into programming mid-segment. CNN's Chiron screamed, "FIA director reveals mid-air audit after racial bias incident." MSNBC framed it as power in silence, flight turns into evidence. Even Fox News scrambled for commentary. Their panel divided but unable to look away. At Airline International's gleaming headquarters, the boardroom was chaos. Screens glowed with feeds from every network. The CEO slammed a fist on the polished table. "How the hell did this happen on one of our flagship routes?" a communications officer stammered. "We had no idea Director Jenkins was on board. Her name wasn't flagged. She booked under initials only." The chief legal counsel snapped, "Initials or not, the evidence is public now. We're not fighting her. We're fighting the truth logged and live streamed." Phones buzzed with calls from senators, investors, advocacy groups. Shareholders demanded answers. "We've already lost 9% in pre-market sentiment," an analyst whispered. "If this keeps trending, we could see double digits." Across the Atlantic in London's financial district, investors huddled in glass towers, scrolling their phones with grim expressions. "This is catastrophic," one murmured. "Regulators will circle. Contracts will stall. Who wants to partner with a brand under FAA audit?" In Washington, FAA officials convened an emergency call. Screens flickered with faces, voices tight and urgent. She invoked audit authority on record. "We must back it. The evidence is undeniable." Another added, "This isn't just optics, it's compliance. If we appear weak, public trust collapses." Statements drafted within minutes. By nightfall, the FAA released an announcement. "We have initiated a formal review of the incident aboard Flight 227. Passenger dignity and safety remain paramount. Director Jenkins's actions are under full agency support." The press exploded. Gershon surged, the new harsh FAA speaks. Shisher audited in the sky to her such systemic turbulence. Back inside the cabin, passengers scrolled furiously. Notifications buzzed like bees trapped in a jar. The silver-haired woman whispered to Amara, a voice trembling. "They're showing you on the news right now. You hear live." Amara inclined her head gently, expression unchanged. Her stylus still traced towers on fractured glass. The college student whispered into her stream. "Guys, the FAA just confirmed it. They are backing her audit. This is history. 5 million watching right now." Her comments scrolled too fast to read. "The agency itself is involved. This airline is finished. She changed aviation forever midair." Meanwhile, in the corporate boardrooms, panic sharpened. PR teams scrambled to draft apologies. "Say we regret the pain caused," one executive urged. The CEO shook his head. "Too late. Words won't stop this. We need action." Legal teams debated suspensions. Operations heads worried about union backlash. If we admit fault, lawsuits flood in. If we deny, the public crucifies us. On Twitter, civil rights leaders spoke. One posted, "When dignity is dismissed, it will stand taller than any captain, any airline." Director Jenkins reminded us today, silence is evidence too. The post racked up 500,000 likes in an hour. Celebrities join louder now. Oprah retweeted with Grace Under Fire, "Change in motion." Ava Duet stitched together clips captioned simply, "Audit this industry." Talk shows lit up. Late-night comedians couldn't resist. One played the clip of the businessman muttering, "People like you," before sipping from a wine glass and quipping, "Turns out people like you means the FAA director holding your career in her hand." Laughter, applause, hashtags renewed. In churches, congregations whispered during evening services, "Did you see her? That woman who sat still?" Pastors mentioned her from pulpits. Sometimes the Lord doesn't need you to shout. Sometimes he needs you to sit steady so the truth reveals itself. Amens rippled through pews in community centers. Elders nodded. "Reminds me of the sit-ins. One said she didn't move, and now the whole system must." At the airport itself, terminals buzzed with rumor. Passengers in waiting areas passed phones back and forth watching live feeds. Flight attendants whispered among themselves, nervous, unsure if their own behavior would be next under scrutiny. And still, Amara said in two-way spine-tall breath, "Steady," the cracked tablet glowing faintly like stained glass in dim light. The captain's voice broke over the intercom, tense but formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are cooperating fully with regulatory oversight. Please remain calm." But his voice trembled at the edges, betraying the fear running through the crew. The silver-haired woman leaned across the aisle, voice hushed but fierce. "You've already changed everything. Do you know that?" Amara met her gaze briefly, eyes calm. "Change isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone watching." The live stream counter ticked past 6 million. On the ground, Airline stock slid further. Rivals seized opportunity. Delta, United, American, all posting carefully worded statements about dignity, promising reviews of training. "We hear you." One wrote, "Passenger, respect it is non-negotiable." The Washington Post released an editorial. When a flight becomes a courtroom and silence becomes evidence, the industry itself must change. At Airline headquarters, the CEO buried his head in his hands. "We're bleeding trust, and trust is everything." But it was too late to contain. The ripple had become a wave, and the wave was global. And through it all, one woman sat still, stylus in hand, fractured glass glowing. She had not raised her voice. She had not left her seat. Yet she had moved an industry to its knees. The narrator's voice, low and steady, wrapped the moment like a seal. The cabin was silent, except for the low hum of engines and the occasional chime of seatbelt signs. But silence now was no comfort. It was a courtroom hush, the kind that comes before a verdict is read. By the time the plane cut through midnight, the live stream counter had surpassed 7 million. Every moment, every twitch of the flight attendant's lip, every shift in the businessman's posture was dissected in real time by millions of eyes. The weight of scrutiny pressed heavier than gravity itself. The businessman in 2C tried to sink deeper into his seat, his once cocky smirk long gone. He tapped nervously at his phone, scrolling, hoping for distraction. But distraction never came. His name had already leaked. Commenters tagged his LinkedIn screenshots of his firm's website spreading across Twitter. His muttered words, "People like you always play the race card," were replayed endlessly. His face frozen mid-sneer. His phone buzzed, screen lighting up with message after message. "A colleague, is this you?" His supervisor, "Call me immediately." Investors tagged his employer demanding statements. He was no longer a businessman in 2C. He was Exhibit A. Across the aisle, the flight attendant sat stiff near the galley clipboard, abandoned on the counter. Her face was pale, her eyes darting toward Amara, then away. She knew the world had already seen her accusation. "You're disrupting the cabin," leveled at a woman who had done nothing but sit still. That 30-second clip was playing on repeat across every news station. Unions began to weigh in online. Some defended her as overworked, undertrained. Others condemned her actions, saying she had betrayed the oath of care all attendants swore. Hashtags piled ground her hashed bias in uniform. Even the captain's voice had lost its practiced calm. He made another announcement urging passengers to stay seated, his words wrapped in clipped professionalism, but his voice trembled just enough to reveal the fear underneath. Viewers noticed, commentators noticed. Within minutes, threads appeared online. The captain's tone reveals liability. He knew bias was happening and did nothing. In seat 2A, Amara remained composed. Stylus in hand, she traced the curve of another tower, her breath steady, her posture unbroken. She did not need to press further. The cabin itself, the cameras, the witnesses were delivering justice without her raising a finger. The silver-haired woman leaned toward her again, her voice low but urgent. They can't hide anymore. The whole world saw it. Amamar inclined her head, her calm unshaken. Truth doesn't need hiding. It only needs light. Her words spread like wildfire again. Transcribed, clipped, posted to Twitter within seconds. The comments flooded. She speaks like scripture. This is beyond viral. This is history. 7 million live, 10 million soon. The businessman in 2C could not stand it anymore. He lurched forward, his voice cracking with desperation. You don't understand. I didn't mean it that way. I was just frustrated. Everyone's exaggerating, but the silver-haired woman cut him off, her twin slicing sharper than any gavel. No, sir, you meant it exactly that way, and now the world sees you for who you are. Gas murmurs the shifting of bodies and seats. Phone zoomed closer, catching every beat of sweat rolling down his temple. He slumped back, defeated his protest, drowned by millions of voices online. His employer by midnight released a statement. We do not condone discriminatory behavior. Effective immediately, Mr. Landry is no longer employed with our firm. The news hit Twitter mid-flight. The comments section exploded, fired mid-air. Justice served at 30,000 FT audit justice. The flight attendant's turn came next. A union spokesperson appeared live on MSNBC. We support crew under stress, but let us be clear. Bias in uniform is unacceptable. This case will face full disciplinary review. By morning, the airline itself confirmed Flight Attendant Rhodes has been suspended pending investigation. Passenger dignity is non-negotiable. The live stream counter hit 9 million. In Washington, senators posted statements. No passenger should face this indignity. We stand with Director Jenkins. The FAA issued another press release. Formal review expanded. Additional audits will follow across carriers. The cabin buzzed with a mix of awe and fear. The cardigan woman whispered prayers of gratitude. The young lawyer in 4D shook his head, muttering, Unpreed, absolutely unprecedented. And still Amara sat in silence. Her cracked tablet glowed faintly, the lines of her tower rising higher with each stroke of the stylus. She had not shouted. She had not moved. And yet justice was unfolding around her like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Passengers shifted, some clapping softly, others whispering, but all knew they had been part of something irreversible. The college student whispered into her phone, her voice breaking, Guys, we're at 10 million. 10 million people watching this live. Justice is happening right now in this cabin. The comments screamed in all caps. She changed everything. This is a verdict. The world is the jury. CNN broke with a new banner. Passenger fired mid-air after viral audit reveal. BBC ran airline bias sparks FAA audit global reckoning. The Washington Post headline read, Silence is weapon justice at $30,000. The silver-haired woman grasped Amar's hand, tears in her eyes. You gave us all a gift. You showed the world what grace looks like under fire. Amar's lips curved slightly, the faintest smile. Her voice, soft but resonant, carried through the cabin. Justice doesn't need anger. It needs clarity. And clarity always comes. Phones caught it instantly. The clip spread across platforms captioned, Justice doesn't need anger. It needs clarity. Millions reposted it within hours. By the time the plane began its descent, the verdict had already been delivered. Not in a courtroom, not by a judge, but by millions of eyes, millions of voices, millions of hearts declaring what they had seen. And still, Amara Jenkins sat silent. Stylus poised a tower rising from cracked glass, living proof that fractures did not erase vision. The narrator's voice closed the moment as steady as a verdict. You are listening to Black Stories Unveiled. These stories are not told for spectacle, but for witness. Tonight, justice was not shouted. It was seated, logged, and revealed. And in that revelation, those who denied dignity faced consequence, not by force, but by truth. The wheels touched down with a jolt, the cabin shuddering as the plane slowed across the tarmac. Seatbelts clicked. Bags shifted overhead. The familiar ritual of landing was underway. Yet nothing about this arrival was routine. For the passengers, for the millions watching live, for the industry, scrambling in panic, this was not just another flight. This was a turning point. As the aircraft taxied toward the gate, the air and first class remained taut. Phones still streamed. The businessman sat slumped, hollow-eyed, already condemned by headlines. The flight attendant, pale and trembling, clutched her clipboard as if it might anchor her against the storm. The captain's voice crackled once more, attempting calm, but it wavered. And in 2A, Amara Jenkins sat tall. Her cracked tablet glowed faintly, lines of a skyscraper arching upward, crossing fractures. She had not raised her voice, not once. Yet she had already shaken an industry. The college student whispered into her phone, "Guys, we've hit 12 million live. 12 million. They're calling this the audit of the century." The comments scrolled in frenzy. She rewrote what power looks like. Not a CEO, not a politician, a passenger. This is history. When the plane reached the gate, security and FAA officials boarded swiftly, their presence crisp and authoritative. Cameras tilted to catch their entrance. They walked directly to 2A, nodding to Amara. She rose calmly, tablet in hand, and for the first time since boarding, she walked down the aisle, not as a passenger, but as evidence incarnate. The silver-haired woman whispered after her, tears glistening, "Thank you." Outside the terminal was chaos. Reporters jostled cameras, flash passengers craned necks. The live stream surged again. 15 million, then 17. Journalists shouted questions. "Director Jenkins, will you sue? Will the crew be fired? What does this mean for the airline industry?" Amara lifted her tablet slightly, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't about punishment. It's about change, and change will come." Those words alone became a headline within minutes. By dawn, the ripple had spread. Aerodyne International stock plunged further. Airlines across the globe issued emergency statements, pledges of retraining, promises of zero tolerance for bias. FAA announced immediate reforms, mandatory dignity training, anonymous passenger reporting, third-party audits. At a press conference, a senator declared, "This is not just about one flight. This is about who we believe deserves to sit in dignity, and the answer is everyone." Applause erupted, cameras flashing. Churches opened Sunday sermons with her words. Pastors repeated, "Change isn't about punishment, it's about reform." Congregations nodded, murmuring amens. Universities scheduled emergency panels. Professors played the clip of Amara holding her cracked tablet aloft, saying, "This is what evidence looks like when silence speaks. Discuss." Students scribbled notes furiously, and still Amara herself did not appear on morning shows or late-night specials. She returned to her work, quietly declining interviews. Her assistant issued a single statement. "Director Jenkins will not speak further. The evidence is enough." That silence only amplified her presence. Meanwhile, Melissa Rhodes, the flight attendant, released her own video, voice-breaking. "I was wrong. I failed in my duty. Director Jenkins chose to log my failure, not erase me. I will undergo training. I will learn. I am sorry." The video spread too controversial, debated, dissected, but not mocked. It was received as part of the reckoning. The businessman's downfall was swifter. His employer cut ties. His name was a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms, mocked in memes. He vanished from a public view, but the stain of his words remained. The captain resigned quietly within a week, citing loss of trust. His letter leaked. She sat still, and I failed to see her. I cannot command skies when I cannot even command fairness. And yet, amidst the wreckage, a strange new growth began. Airlines adopted reforms, not just in words, but in deeds. Passengers began to share their stories under the #dignity. In the skies, recounting moments of bias demanding accountability. Within days, the hashtag passed 50 million uses. Civil rights groups formed coalitions. FAA partnered with advocacy organizations. Training manuals were rewritten. Old protocols discarded. In community centers, elders said, "She reminded us of the sit-ins. She didn't move and the world had to." In classrooms, students debated, would you have shouted or would you have sat still like her? At dinner tables, families asked one another, what would you do if dignity was denied you? And through it all, Amara remained steady, silent, unseen, except in the footage that replayed endlessly. Weeks later, a quiet story emerged. A photo snapped by a passerby showed Amara walking out of a public library, a young girl by her side holding her hand. The caption read, "She's mentoring the next generation." It went viral, not with outrage, but with reverence. The photo was paired with her earlier words, "Change isn't about punishment, it's about reform." The internet declared it the true legacy of the flight. Not the firings, not the resignations, but the grace of a woman who chose reform over revenge. And once more, the narrator's voice returned. Not booming, not forced, but like a steady radio in the background. The clip closed with the image of her cracked tablet glowing faintly, skyscraper lines crossing the fracture, rising tall. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered everywhere. The flight was over. The audit launched, the villains disgraced. The attendant was suspended. The captain resigned. The businessman became a walking cautionary tale. Airline's boardroom bled trust as FAA reforms reshaped the skies. The world had already judged condemned and begun to move forward. But Amara Jenkins had not spoken since her statement in the cabin. She had left the cameras behind with the same steady silence that had carried her through row 2. And yet silence did not mean absence. Weeks later, a press advisory rippled through the media director Jenkins to speak publicly for the first time since Flight 227. Reporters buzzed, analysts speculated, hashtags reignited. Some expected fury, some expected lawsuits, others expected nothing at all. The venue was not a grand ballroom or a marble courtroom. It was a community auditorium in Chicago, small but packed to the rafters. Wooden pews creaked beneath the weight of citizens, elders, activists, journalists, even flight crew in uniform. Cameras lined the back, but the air was less spectacle than vigil. Amara entered quietly, wearing a simple navy dress, her cracked tablet tucked beneath her arm. The crowd rose instinctively, not in applause, but in reverence, like a congregation greeting its pastor. She stepped to the podium, placed the tablet down, and looked out across faces. Black, white, young, old, everyone waiting. Her voice came calm, low, deliberate. I did not plan to become a headline. I boarded a plane to travel, not to teach. But the world decided to learn that day. And I want you to know, so did I. The room hushed. I learned that silence can reveal what shouting cannot. That evidence does not need fury. That grace is harder than anger, but also heavier because it leaves a legacy behind. Gasps and nods rippled through the crowd. She lifted her cracked tablet, showing its fractured glass, the glowing lines of a tower sketched across the break. This screen cracked in turbulence, but I kept building on it because fractures are not endings. They are reminders of what survives. And now I want to give this reminder to the very person who handed it to me. The room stiffened, murmurs. Who could she mean? The side door opened, and there, escorted quietly trembling, was Melissa Rhodes, the flight attendant. Her face pale, her eyes wet. The crowd gasped, some recoiling, some whispering. Melissa approached with the stage shame written across her posture. Amara extended the tablet toward her. This tablet carried every log of that flight, every denial, every accusation, every truth. It would be easy to keep it as evidence, to lock it away as a proof of your failure. But I believe it should not be a monument to shame. It should be a tool for change. Gasps swept the room. Melissa's hands trembled as she reached for the tablet. Amar's gaze held hers firm, but not cruel. Learn from this, Amara said softly. Carry it into every flight you serve. Let it remind you that dignity is never optional, never delayed, never denied. If you do that, this fracture will not mark your failure. It will mark your transformation. Melissa sobbed openly, clutching the tablet like a lifeline. The crowd erupted, not in boos, not in outrage, but in stunned silence that turned to applause, cautious at first, then swelling like a wave. Amar lifted her hands, slightly quieting the room. This is what grace looks like. Not excusing, not forgetting, but choosing a future where even those who failed us can help rebuild the world they once cracked. Phones shook as they captured her words. The clip spread within minutes. Headlines screamed, Jenkins hands audit tablet to flight attendant in act of grace. Twitter erupted grace heavier than vengeance. She gave her the evidence. This is how you change the skies. CNN played it on loop. MSNBC called it the grace verdict. The Washington Post ran an op-ed, When justice becomes grace, legacy begins. In community halls, elders nodded. She gave her enemy the tools to do better. That's power. In classrooms, teachers replayed the clip, asking students, would you have done the same? Could you? Families debated it at dinner tables. Some skeptical, some moved, all engaged. The photo of Melissa clutching the crack tablet, tears streaming down her face, became iconic. Mimi's labeled it the audit of grace. Surged, re-year-one grace in the skies legacy over vengeance and Amara. She stepped down from the podium quietly, her work not in spectacle but in seeds planted. She returned to her horses at dawn, her fencing at dusk, her designs traced across fractured glass. She lived as she always had, disciplined, quiet, steadfast. But her silence was no longer empty. It was full of witness of memory of a legacy chosen. The narrator's voice returned one final time, soft, steady, like a radio humming through the night. You are listening to Black Stories Unveiled. We do not tell these stories for noise, but for meaning. Justice served may close a chapter, but grace opens a future. Amara Jenkins showed us that dignity defended is powerful, but dignity shared, even with those who failed us, is how change endures. The cabin was once a courtroom. The world became a jury, but in the end, grace wrote the verdict. The clip closed with the image of Melissa holding the cracked tablet to her chest and Amara walking quietly away, shoulders square, posture unbroken. And one last question lingered, not shouted, not forced, but offered gently to every viewer, every heart, especially those who had lived long enough to know how cycles repeat. If you carried both the wound and the power, would you cling to vengeance or would you choose grace?